Hello and welcome back to AI podcast by Bong Tech Trends, where we explore the frontier of artificial intelligence. This time we are going to discuss about the most human of fields, healthcare. Today our guest is someone who is not only a professor or a PhD holder, he is also a teacher who is teaching us to think like a doctor. Today our guest is Mr. Anirban Mukherjee.
So yeah, I'm originally from Kolkata, and then I moved to US for my PhD. And after completing my PhD, I moved again continent to Europe. I'm here in Europe since 2014, so more than a decade now. So yeah, I have walked and lived across three different continents, and that's a vast amount of experience of working in different cultures with different group of people, and yeah, just learning in the process and getting better at it. Yeah.
So, what was before going to abroad, what was the education you acquired from India and where you actually studied in school life? That things you
Right.
can highlight.
So, I mean, I'm okay. I'm originally from one of the suburbs of Kolkata, and I went to one of the how to say that this is I mean probably the local would immediately understand one of the Ramakrishna missions,
Okay.
but the outside people might have struggled. I don't have any other translation of Ramakrishna missions to any equivalent. It's a very unique experience. So yeah, and then how? So what happened? It's basically I was quite an average student, I would say, nothing special. And then after finishing the schools, then I went to one of the private engineering colleges. In my case, it was BP Poddar again. So it's
Okay.
the locals might understand, the others might not, but that's okay. So it's one of the many colleges that are out there. And again, even in the colleges, I was quite an average, mediocre student, nothing special. So the problem, I think, in retrospect, I realized is that I didn't have any how to say scientific role models. So science never interested me. So
Okay.
my role models were the performers. So the music of Kavi Shuman Chattopadhyay back then, or the while growing up watching Saurabh Ganguly taking his shirt off. So the contrarians were my role models, and then in the Indian education system, well, contrarians are not really very encouraged, right? So that was something that I was living with, and I was more or less sure that yeah, I mean, I'm not bad at getting grades, so to say. As I said, I'm average, above average, so I can get grades if I want to put my head into getting grades. So I was more or less sure I will end up with one of the IT jobs. And then what happened is that there was a flick where suddenly for my final year, so basically there is this concept of a final year project that you do. But I started a little bit earlier and started doing projects with this amazing group of scientists from Shah Institute of Nuclear Physics. So Shundip Sarkar, Sofiul Mollik, then Shubhajit Karmakar. So they are a group of people who are working on image processing,
Okay.
and they were writing codes in MATLAB back then in 2008, 2009. So very, very different time. But that was the first time I felt like, wow, all of the things that I thought crap and not interesting, suddenly I can see things, and the codes don't mean just you do let us see things of printing stars and more stars, but there are more fun things to do. So that really got me into research and really the visual way of looking at it. So image processing, computer vision, medical image analysis. So that's sort of my journey basically. And yeah, stick to that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we are directly starting our first round, that is origins part. It is an introduction round. So the first question is reverse engineering the doctor's mind.
Right.
So That's an incredible way to put it, right? So, what inspired it?
Right. So, to understand why reverse engineering the doctor's mind is a vision, you have to understand a little bit about the context in which the vision is developed, right? And that has nothing to do with AI per se. So, if you are just thinking of the history of humanity, nowhere in our history of humanity we had medical data of planetary proportion at our fingertip. Never before it happened, right? So if you are thinking of medical medicine being practiced for 2000 plus years in some form of other, but it was always local, always something, a little bit, a local type of diseases and cures. And suddenly we have this huge amount of medical data, and then what we have with it is basically these incredible physicians who has the ability, a remarkable generalization ability. So if you just see that, like, they need to, like, they have a very data efficient way to look at a few patients, a few ways disease manifests, and then suddenly generalizes, understand the problem, what's going on. And we have seen it quite recently during our pandemic, right? So after the first few weeks, people already had a fair idea of how to treat what type of patients. Now the problem really is that if you look at the equivalence of what we were doing um, in the medical AI setting, the deep learning revolution, so to say, the first group of revolution, there was hardly anything that is equivalent to that. There was no generalization capability. You need to have a lot and lot of data, and we do sort of quote unquote pixel peeping, pattern recognition to understand it. So that's where the idea comes that, okay, we really have to reverse engineer the mind of physicians in a way so that we give that kind of capabilities to the medical AI system that we are talking about, what's going to revolutionize the next generation of healthcare. And that simply can't happen by doing more and more deep learning. And we have to really rethink a little bit. So the idea here is that let's try to start like a medical resident, medical intern, then train, learn like a medical resident, and then practice like a physician. If you can do all these three together, that's one way of reverse engineering the doctor's mind. It's not the only way, but it's probably the best way, as in this is the only way we know where things have become successful. We are training doctors for 100 years in this certain way, so why not our AI systems?
So AI in technology, we all know, and nowadays it's become a very hot topic. But AI in healthcare, it's a little bit difficult to understand for the young generation and for the other people also. So how you are explaining, I mean, in a normal people, that how AI impacting in the healthcare industry?
So, well, healthcare is a sector which is seriously lacking professionals. So, there are countries without medical universities where you can train professionals. And even a country like India, where you are from, beyond the urban centers, it's very, very difficult to get access to healthcare. There are parts in the world where we are talking about difficulties in finding clean drinking waters, right? So forget about healthcare professionals being available who will take care of patients. So that's really the setting. And if that is the setting, we are talking about scaling up access to care in a way where it's not possible to do it in a very traditional way. Let's train more and more doctors, and at some point we will have a nice doctor to patient ratio. That's not going to happen. So in Bangladesh, I think the radiologist to patient ratio is 1 in a million. So you can imagine that that's crazy. That's not going to generalize. And that's where the technology really has to play its part. And it doesn't have to be a complete decision system end to end, but really depending on a particular group of people, their need, the technology can bring a lot of value to the care that simply doesn't exist anymore. And that's where the AI part really comes in.
So I want to ask a question, that is, what does the future of image guided surgeries look like? I mean, when AI can predict, even guide the surgeon's next move. So I'm very much interested to know about that.
Right. So image guided surgery, so anything where image is involved, AI has a big part to play. But surgery is a very, very interesting thing because what happens is that traditionally surgery was open, right? So you really cut people open and perform whatever you want to do. So that leaves big scars. Often that means significantly higher risk of contamination from different types of pathogens afterwards. The healing takes longer. Surgery is becoming more and more minimally invasive, as in instead of doing big cuts, you really make small incisions, small holes, and put these really thin, tall instruments into it and perform the surgery. So if you are really thinking about that, so suddenly you will realize what we are missing now is that we have to, as surgeons, they have to do a mental mapping of the geometry because you are not seeing it with your eyes, but you are putting a camera on top of an endoscope, which you can just turn around. And that geometry of where you are performing, it has nothing to do with what you are seeing. You are seeing it in a screen, and you have to make a mental adjustment based on that geometry and where the tools come in, etc., etc. So that's a huge amount of cognitive load while they are trying to save someone from really dangerous things. And then there are also problems. So, for example, if you are trying to resect a tumor, just by looking the tumor directly, you really don't know where the tumor ends and the healthy tissue begins. So, bringing more information in terms of visualization, in terms of image analysis, putting different types of images together, pre-operative, post-operative. Sometimes what happens is that you are trying to drill through bones where there are really thin nerves behind the bones, which you can't really see because you are just drilling through it. And if you touch the bones, touch those nerves, there will be significant harm to the patient. So this is the entire premise where bringing guidance with technologies such as AI can play a huge amount of benefit to the patient safety, to the surgeons, making their cognitive load lower, etc., etc.
So you are also the host of a podcast, right? AI Ready
Right.
Healthcare podcast. So where you bridge actually clinicians, researchers, I mean all of these people. So the thing is how this is impacting or helping you in your research journey.
Um, okay, so the podcast is an interesting concept. So when I started, it was basically still the pandemic, and when in pandemic people have time to do random things, so they just decide to do random stuff. So that's how I started. But what was really important to realize is that if you are into any form of research community, you end up going to the annual conferences of that community once every year. So, for example, in our case, for medical AI, one of the biggest like the premier conference is called Mikai, but you go to Mikai for 3 days and there are 4,000 people, so you hardly get a chance to meet everyone, maybe have a very short discussion about the research they are doing. What is still missing though is the background stories of this research, the context in which the research is done, why they are doing certain things in a certain way. And that's sort of the conversation that I wanted to have. Plus, there are certain things that you can discuss in a podcast format where people are more open, which you can't really do in a paper-based conference format. And we didn't really have an equivalent thing for medical AI. Plus, it's not just technologies, just clinicians. We also have regulatory people. We have industry people who are translating some of these research into the products, which then goes into the patient benefit. So you need to have a sort of a safe place where people can talk. And that was something that AI Ready Healthcare is, and it's going on for 5 years, close to 100 episodes. So yeah, it's a long journey.
So another one question I was actually thinking in my mind, that I mean AI, is it possible to near future AI can predict the oncology and hematology department also, like the cancer patients it will be treated in advance through AI methodologies, anything like the PET CT scan, that is a I think the major detection method for the oncology department. So, what kind of impact AI can do in oncology and hematology department? My question is, I mean, I wanted to know that the major impact which will come around 2030 or on that after that period of time.
So that's a good question. I think it depends on what context you are looking at. So what I mean by that is, like, India will be very different from Europe, Europe will be very different from USA, etc.,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah.
So on a broad scale, what the main changes that we are expecting to see is, for example, we will go into more quantitative approach. So when you are looking at radiologies right now, like, people just basically have enough time to say, okay, there is a tumor, now do like the histopathology, take some tissue out and look it under the microscope. That's like, or the best case, they say, okay, in the long axis the tumor has these many millimeters, but tumors are not nice rounded shapes, right? So they have really very weird shapes, very different from one another. There are different microenvironments, so really quantifying all these differences, right? So that's one of the thing where simply humanly it's not possible. The human workload is not there anywhere available across the world. So that is the first thing. The second thing that we are seeing a lot is basically uh, uh, exports, availability of exports for different tumor subtypes, categories, etc., etc. And there, the exports might not be available for beyond the major urban centers, and AI might help, for example, to prioritize, to even bring some of the remote care to these particular areas. uh, Fully autonomous AI that does the diagnosis and treatment is not possible, definitely because of the technology, but also more importantly because of the regulations. So medical is not about like making a dating app or making whatever, right? Like, it's not just a fun thing. People's life depends on it. So every time there is a medical software that is being developed, it has to be go through a approval process before it comes to use, because somebody has to be liable, somebody should be sued if something goes wrong. And for AI, it's not really very clear who is responsible when things go wrong. So
Very
a
true.
complete autonomous AI probably not gonna exist by 2030.
Okay, so we are done with our first round. Now we will go to our second round, that is intelligence engine. We are going to discuss some topics in a more detailed way. If I talk about raccoon, the thing is, what practical solutions have emerged from raccoon?
All right, so maybe to our to your viewers, to your listeners, what Raccoon is. So Raccoon, the full form is Radiological Cooperative Network. So that's the short form of Raccoon. And we also are involved in equivalent national scale infrastructure projects for pathology. So the idea here is that, so Germany was quite visionary in the sense that early on during the pandemic, Germany put a lot of money from a national scale government level way, so that we can build infrastructures, so that we can actually do federated learning at a national scale. So Federated learning, as in you don't share the patient data stays at the hospital. What you do is that you have a neural network, an AI at a cloud or whatever platform, and then it goes to each hospital, learns the local pattern, comes back, you consolidate the knowledge, and that way you get better in terms of the knowledge while making sure that yeah, the patient data never leaves the hospital. And that's a very very important topic, again, unlike typical examples of dating app or whatever, right, where nobody gives a damn about people's data. So and this is something which is extremely difficult in a hospital way, because hospital infrastructure nowhere in the world was ready to handle such things. Having high-end GPUs, having reliable neural like networks to transfer these AI neural networks back and forth, etc., etc. Having a way in which digital data can be anonymized, put into these local nodes. All of these had to be built from scratch. And what is also important to realize is that you have to do a lot of quality assurance in a very blind sense, as in you have to assure quality of the data each hospital is providing without having access to the data of the hospital, because you simply can't look at the data. That's the entire framework. So these are really practical problems which Raccoon, as an infrastructure project, we started dealing with back in the pandemic days. So it was originally a small project, and then later the German ministry put about 50 million euro into making it a successful project. And we had many interesting findings that are not obvious or were not obvious at the start. So some of these are, of course, the quality control part, but there was also an interesting thing where the idea is that radiologists, when they look at patterns, and they have names for certain patterns. So if you are talking about chest CTs, they call ground glass opacity, consolidation, etc., to talk about the amount of infection there in the lungs. Now, the funny thing is that even when they are talking about the same names for the same chest cities, they are like across Germany, they are not talking about the exact same things. So we had to come up with protocols so that we can standardize between radiologists what they mean by certain terms. And that was really, for example, a very new, unusual thing that we had to deal with as part of this Raccoon project.
Yeah, so that means another important thing is especially around the privacy when
Right.
You are, I mean, preserving collaboration in healthcare AI. So that's also important.
Yes, absolutely. That is very crucial. Patient data is private, and even when you are using it for research purposes, it should be anonymized, etc., etc.
Yeah, so if I talk about your lab work on no line of sight computer vision, how does that work, and what possibilities does it actually unlock?
Right. So the no line of sight computer vision is more of the direction where we were discussing sometimes before about the image guided surgery, where this no line of sight becomes a problem, right? Because you don't have a direct line of sight, so you have to make a mental geometry, and there you come with different things. So we have been working on this for some time. We have many different projects for neurosurgery, for surgeries in the eyes, in the abdomen, vascular surgery. But maybe one example that we can give is a recent work, and that is very interesting, is basically what we are trying to do is we are trying to synthesize, generate in a generative AI sense, surgical errors. Now, what probably would be very interesting or unusual for your listeners to understand is that surgical error is general medical procedural error is a huge killer, as in procedural error kills more people than all sorts of like TBs and influenzas and viruses, all of these combined. So that these are basically errors that can be reduced if you take certain procedural steps, right? So, and then what we are trying to do is like we are trying to generate rare failure cases for surgeries which are otherwise have gone through smoothly. So why this is important? So one thing, you can think of surgery as anything that is based on skill. So you can think of it as a cricket, for example, right? So what you do if you are a batsman trying to get better at a certain type of deliveries that you are not used to, you get out several times, you practice, maybe use the bowling machines, maybe use the ball boys, early career bowlers, and you practice that. So that basically means it's a very deep focused practice on things where you are failing. There is no such equivalent for surgery. The old way of doing surgical training was see one, do one, teach one. As in, you see one surgery, do the second one on patient, and the third time you do, you also teach someone. So that is a very, very dangerous process of learning. Dangerous as in people die because you make mistakes. So what we are trying to do is like we typically look at cases and try to see, can we generate really situations that are not there, but imagine what happen if such a situation happens there. And there we really created some of these eye surgical simulation where typically, for example, cataract surgery is a very safe process, right? So 20 million to 30 million cataract surgeries happen every year. Probably all of you have someone in your family who has gone through. Things don't happen until things happen. And one of the problems of that is that the like when this particular thing happens, when the eye, like the center of the eye gets sort of shrunk and there is still a tool inside, then it's very dangerous because then you can hurt the entire process. And then you will hardly find any data set that has such cases because people only make available on public data sets where they were successful, right? And
also, these types of examples are very rare.
Exactly, they're very rare. And even if you like imagine you are a surgeon, you made such a mistake, you won't be very keen to make it public, right? So so if you got bowled 3 times on a type of ball and there is a way of hiding those bowls, you would not probably like to have it as YouTube video. So that's an equivalent thing where they have the possibility. So what we are doing is basically we are trying this type of precise synthesis of these surgical video sequences where things are going wrong to bring more awareness. Now, the problem really is that majority of GenAI people really rely on the idea that, okay, we write text and we write more text and prompts and better prompts, and then we generate. That's great for avocado chairs or astronauts on horseback. That's not precise enough for surgical simulation of eyes where there is a tool inside. So we are coming up with this scene graph based strategy to really precisely synthesize these situations which didn't happen, but making surgeons aware of in case it happens what they can do.
So another question that continuous model updates in dynamic clinical environments face regulatory hurdles, right? So how is the team of your team is solving that as a technically, clinically and legally? Because it's a very tough to handle the situation also right now.
Right. Yes, indeed. So that's a great point. So what we started is back in 2020, we got a lot of money from the German Ministry of Health to look at this problem of continual learning, but from the perspective of clinical, technical, and regulatory. So typically what happens is that technical people think regulation is boring, and regulators think that technical people make too many questions, so there is no point in discussions. So but really what we wanted to have is that open that discussion and trying to have a platform where we can talk about both aspects, and then somewhere into these discussions, what happened is that FDA, the US FDA, Food and Drug Administration, they came up with a set of guidelines which now became regulations. It's called PCCP, so Predetermined Change Control Plan. And that was again done primarily by regulators. So that was a very interesting opportunity for us to make things aware. So what we did is basically we wrote a series of LinkedIn blog posts about technical scenarios where PCCP would not hold, as in there are ways in which technically you can bypass PCCP, do crap things in terms of continual learning, and still the regulators will be fine with it. And yeah, so that was something that then basically went into the German government, and we recently are writing several white papers to really make this awareness up there. But yeah, that's really one part of it. But there are also parts where we actually collaborated with an industry partner to sort of what we call closing the gap of the loop of radiology. So it's like basically radiology images in the database, the PAC system, the reporting system, and AI, so that we can sort of close the loop, and the AI generates the first report, which then the radiologist can change and you can learn continually. So that's the product that we developed with these particular industry partners, but we also made a lot of the code bases for these available. And this basically was one of the first works where, like, my first PhD student Camila Gonzalez, she won MICAI Young Scientist Award, which is basically in the MICAI sense, in the medical AI sense, that the highest award that you can get. So yeah, that was quite a few early successes we had in that continual medical AI context.
Okay, so the thing is how we are thinking about spreading the awareness. I mean, what you have already mentioned, that if I talk about the eye surgery, so the sector is very much saturated. And if I talk about the remote areas, especially in our country, so it's going to be a difficult job. So,
Right.
what do you think? What are the challenges you are facing right now, and how you are thinking to overcome these challenges?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So, when you are talking about surgeries in remote areas across anywhere in the world, it's a difficult challenge, right? So, you can't take that challenge up that easily. We had some of the ideas about doing remote robotic surgeries. But that's also a bit of a tricky situation because of, again, the issue of liability that I was talking about, that if the robot is somewhere and the surgeon is performing remotely, then who is liable if something goes wrong? But beyond that, the question where we can actually bring a lot of value is for the fact that we can actually think of the situation. So even in somewhere in India, mobile network is all pervasive, right? So wherever you go, there is some form of mobile networks available. With Geo, now the data is also free, etc., etc. Uh, so what you can really think of is that if we are not building these big, massive AI, PLM, foundation model, and bigger AIs, but if we are thinking of really tiny AI that can run on smartphones, then suddenly a lot of the primary care professionals in this remote region, like buying, for example, an ultrasound or a X-ray machine, which is a remote, which is a lightweight X-ray, is not very difficult. But analyzing that with a radiologist is the difficulty, right? So if we have a smartphone which jacked into those systems, and then you can do analysis, that brings a lot of value, because then you can prioritize who should go to the urban centers for further treatment, and before for example, the tumor gets really big and the situation is out of control. But also the interesting part that you can do in such a situation is that often these people who are in the remote regions, they are having a very different population demographic. The diseases manifest in very different way, and those data is not there in the public data sets, right? So often, even if you take your trained AI model of whatever foundation model, this, that, and then bring it to there, it will fail. We have done series of papers that show that data diversity, like ends up failures for AI models. But if you are really thinking of such tiny models, and potentially if you can train those on these smartphones, and there we have done some recent works with these neural cellular automata models, then basically the possibility is to actually keep the patient privacy still intact while making sure that you are bringing the knowledge of this patient data back into the knowledge of the AI and getting better disease diagnosis, etc. And that's something where we can do a lot.
As a researcher and also as a podcaster, how do you
Right.
balance deep tech innovation with public engagement and education also?
Well, how do I balance? That's that's a good question. So how many things I do? I typically teach a lecture. I have my group of about 10 PhDs I advise, plus about 40 to 50 students at the bachelor's and master's levels that work in my group. Then we organize conferences, we organize workshops, we have projects going on with collaborators, and then I do the podcast roughly. So these are the things that I do. So that's basically wearing many different hats, so to say. So the way I currently go about it, so I basically divide my weeks in according to these hats. So I have a creator mode, an advisor mode, management mode, communicator mode, and for each of these hats, basically I have particular tasks that I need to do, and I sort of uh, block times at the morning, each morning, for a certain set of tasks. So typically half an hour, 1 hour, and then there are certain tasks that require more time. So if you are working on a paper, working on a proposal, but that's really what I do. So basically my weeks are very structured and scheduled in a way. That's a very non Bengali way of doing things, I think. But that's something that you have to do if you are a busy academic. And then if you do that, then what happens is that basically that then you are not how to say, you are not running behind arbitrary goals, but you have very clear understanding of the things that we can achieve, and what can be done. So you asked about podcast public engagement, for example. So I have a schedule of 3 seasons per year, 21, like 7 episodes each season, so 21 episodes. And then I know when I will release for each year, at which time frame I will release my episode. So I go back from there and backtrack when I have to do the recording so that I can release it. And that's how we also write papers, we also write proposals. So everything is sort of backtracked according to that. Does it work? Better than having no plans, but it's a plan. It doesn't always work, of course, but it's better to have a plan than having no plans.
Yeah, a bad plan is always better than no plan.
Exactly, exactly.
So we are done here, and now we are going to start our final round, that is rapid fire protocol. You will
All
have
right.
two options and you have to choose only one.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start. The first question is imaging or robotics?
Imaging.
Okay. What will you prefer, surgeons or data scientists?
Surgeons.
Okay. Emulated models or real world trials?
Real world.
Okay. Deep learning or mixed, I mean, mixed generation AI, something like that.
Mix.
Okay. Which one frustrates you the most, regulations or innovations?
Neither frustrates me, to be honest. I'm fine with it. It's both are part of my life I've chosen. So yeah.
Okay. So podcasting or publishing, which one would you prefer?
I would say both. But if I have to choose one, I'd say podcasting.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We are done here. Now we will wrap up the podcast with a final question.
What will be the AI impact on speech therapy?
Speech therapy, as in helping people out who
Yes.
has speech impediment.
Yes, yes.
Correct. Exactly right.
If we talk about the field of audiology, and if I talk about especially for kids, that they are having problem
Yeah.
in speaking.
Right. So that's a great question. So first of all, I don't work on speeches. I'm more like images, as I said. But the point being said that I have a 4-year-old, and I have seen how the equivalently aged kids are growing up. So the first thing that we have to identify here is that we are looking at a epidemic proportion of speech related problems simply because of the smartphone addictions. Like, this is almost like giving cocaine to your kids and expecting there will be no impact during their developmental years and they will be all fine. That's insane to think, because all of these apps, all of these videos are designed to have their mind to be played in a certain way, and they are disengaged. Good. So the first thing that means the first step of these apps, what they can do is to identify early where such a problem is setting in, because parents often are doing it simply because they are sort of disengaging with the kids because of their pressured work life, stress situation, personal life. I'm not judging them. What I'm trying to mention here is that it is a problem that is happening because kids, there is a disengagement between parents and kids. So the parents don't even know that when the problem is starting, and the early you detect the problem, the better you can bring the cure. And there, I think there is a significantly high potential for such apps, because you don't put the kids into any stressful situation, right? So any visit to a pediatrician is a stress, and often typical pediatricians are not speech therapists, right? So they're finding the appointment of a very busy speech therapist for pediatric patients is a problem, and there you can bring a lot of value. What also this opens up is my earlier thing that I was talking about, is basically if you look at the reach of a mobile network versus the possibility of someone sitting 200 kilometers away from a major urban center, they are bringing their kid to to a speech therapist. This is a long process. Whereas if you have such an app, that makes things much faster. So I see there a significant amount of potential in early diagnosis or early flagging that, okay, so these kids are at risk and they need to be taken care of by the speech therapist. Maybe some of the therapy sessions can be done by video. I don't know, but there are definitely a lot of potential in making the life a little bit easier.
Actually, what you have mentioned is correct. I mean, if I talk about the childs who are actually facing these problems, if you talk to their parents, you will find a common solution from the 90% of parents. That is, we don't talk to our child. We don't have time
Right.
to talk to them.
True.
No, that problem we always find. That's the most common problem. That
Yes.
speak with your child more and more, and they will get used to it.
Yes, exactly. And then you can also recognize a lot of unusual things in your child if you spend time with your child, but if you are not doing it and you are replacing yourself with a smartphone screen, that's dangerous even for grown-ups, right? Like you can often see with the YouTube shorts, you are just scrolling through it, 15 minutes have passed and you didn't notice that you are just scrolling through it, and then suddenly realized what I was doing. So imagine that for a child.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. We are done here with our session. So if you could give us some feedback, that would be great.
All right, thanks. It's really wonderful talking to both of you. I'm really glad that you have started it from Kolkata. It's not very common, I guess, to have such a technology podcast from Kolkata. And yeah, I mean, I wish you all the success. I'm sure if you continue it 5 years, 4 years down the line, you will suddenly realize one day how many videos you have produced, how many podcast episodes you have produced, and that will be a pride point for both of you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Right. So people who are watching this, please consider subscribing and please share this video, especially with those people who are interested in healthcare sectors and also want to learn about how AI is going to or already implementing healthcare.